Hello, everybody. Wolfbang here. Today is Tuesday, June the 24th. Another hot day here in Cincinnati, Ohio. We are currently sitting at 95 degrees, but they say it feels more like 103. That's the heat index. I don't know. I just know it's freaking hot. Anyway, so I had the day off today to take my wife to the dentist, but she was denied. She was supposed to get three teeth pulled, and neither one of us paying attention. She had a cup of coffee with whatever pills she takes in the morning. When she got to the dentist, they asked her. She was honest, and they said, "We can't put you under because you had a cup of coffee." So she is rescheduled at a later date, but at least it's paid for already. Because, I mean, when we got there, because our dental insurance sucks. They don't pay for extractions, and they don't pay for the. Here's what they do pay for: cleaning and fillings, I think. So, anyway, so we paid for this procedure this morning, took care of everything, all the paperwork, and we're sitting in the office. And her appointment was at 9:15 this morning, and they were on time. It was like 10 after 9. They called her back, and 5 minutes later, this nurse walks out and says, "Hey, Mr. Fang, did your wife drink coffee this morning?" I was like, "Yeah." Blah blah blah. Well, she can't do that, man. I was like, "Damn, lady." Anyway, but that's beside the point. So I got a day off paid, came home, played with my tomato plants, uh, hung out with the wife. She made me watch soap operas with her. That's why I was downstairs most of the time. No. She does her thing when I'm at work, man. I'm not gonna mess with her schedule. She does what she does. Anyway, I gotta stop babbling. The article I'm going to share today, I actually read this morning and found it very interesting. Um, it's about the B-2 bomber and kind of what it takes to fly this aircraft. So let me share this. You can listen to me read it, or you can look it up yourself and read it. But like I said, I found it pretty interesting. It says, "Was it like to fly a B-2 bomber for 2 days straight?" Here's what record-holding pilots had to say. Stealth bombers flew roughly 37 hours to bomb Iran's nuclear sites this past weekend. The longest B-2 flight was 44-hour bombing mission to Afghanistan in October 2001. The Iran mission required a large portion of the U.S. B-2 fleet to work at once. 7 American stealth bombers flew roughly 37 hours to bomb Iran's nuclear sites over the weekend. Pentagon called the Operation Midnight Hammer bombing run the longest B-2 Spirit flight in decades. The record for the longest B-2 bomber flight belongs to Melvin Dela and Brian Jethro Neal, 2 retired Air Force pilots who in October 2001 flew a 44-hour flight executing one of the first bombing missions into Afghanistan in the wake of the tragic 9/11 terror attacks. They shared what it's like to carry out these exceedingly long bombing missions and navigate the stressful aerial refuelings needed to keep the B-2 flying on only a few hours sleep and some beef jerky. See, everybody likes beef jerky. The September 11, 2001 attacks unfolded as the duo was in the middle of an annual nuclear capabilities training exercise, Neil told Business Insider. Amid confusing reports of hijacked planes, Neil first thought they were part of the training, but soon it was clear, and his unit was preparing mission options for top Bush administration officials in Washington eager to respond with force. Neil and Daley were among a handful of B-2 crews that headed to Afghanistan that week, Daley said. The pair knew the B-2 spirit well enough. However, they flew the plane only a couple of times a month to help preserve the expensive aircraft and mitigate maintenance issues. They spent most of their time training on the T-38 training aircraft, a less costly option to keep flight skills sharp. While they occasionally flew their B-2 bomber across country to practice long-haul flights, excuse me, and they'd never flown it for a wartime operation until one evening in early October, when the pair took off in the wee hours of the morning from Whitman Air Force Base in Missouri, where all B-2s are housed, heading west to Afghanistan. Before they took off for the mission, the airmen responsible for furnishing the pilots with mission-appropriate gear, excuse me, had thoughtfully purchased a cot for the back of the bomber, one just long enough to lie down on, Neil said, recalling the aid HOC sleeping arrangements in the $2 billion stealth aircraft with a chuckle. I'm sure that wasn't his chuckle. When the ladder comes up and you enter the cockpit, there is a flat spot on the floor that is about a little over 6 feet long, Neil said of the sleeping area. And so I think over the 2 days that I was in that little space, I spent about 5 hours in that cot total. 5 hours isn't much sleep for a 44-hour flight. Pilots are often provided a stimulant by flight surgeons to help stay awake, Neil said. He declined to take that stimulant, known collegially as a go pill, but Daley did. You're young and you're doing something that you're trained to do, and there's a bit of excitement and a lot of adrenaline, Neil remembered. The two took turns trying to get some naps through pre-mission nerves that kept either from getting much rest. Also, flying west toward Afghanistan meant the sun was up all day. You don't feel like sleeping when the sun's staring you in the eyes, Neil said. Flying a B-2 bomber. Compared with aircraft such as the F-16 Fighting Falcon and the F-22 Raptor, fighter jets, both of which Neil flew throughout his career, flying a bomber like B-2 is like driving a semi-truck after spending years in a sports car, he explained. Daley already had bomber experience, working with B-52 strategic bombers before joining the B-2 community, but the Spirit is a very different plane. The B-2 coming along in the air requires only one pilot to stay alert, meaning the second one can rest. But landing, taking off, dropping bombs, and refueling require both crew members. Refueling a B-2, a requirement for these long flights, especially with a heavy payload, is no easy task. Tanker crews must be specifically certified to fuel different aircraft, including the B-2, to account for each platform's unique characteristics. The nerve-wracking ordeal usually lasts about 30 minutes each time, and it's a tough one on the bomber pilots as it is on those in the tanker. The Northrop Grumman built B-2 is unique not just for its unusual flying wing design, but also because it's stealthy with a sleek design and coatings to evade radar. The aircraft's surface is an important contributor to its low observability. Even small scratches to the surface, such as one caused by an A-rate fueling boom, can affect its stealth. Dele said, I hope I'm saying that guy's last name right. It's very intensive, he said of the refueling process, adding that he and Neil received 7 different refuels from tankers during the lengthy 2-day mission. Neil estimated they needed a total of 750,000 pounds of JP-8 fuel. The goal was to take on as much fuel as possible since so much flight time was spent over the ocean. You're at the gas station going hundreds of miles an hour, Neil said, describing navigating the refueling as a tense workout, especially since the B-2's design generates a lift that oddly pushes the tanker away during refueling. Refueling and last-minute order from headquarters are how Neil and Dele ended up with the record for the longest B-2 flight. Dele and Neil dropped a dozen bombs from their B-2 before departing Afghan airspace. But just as the pilots were catching their breath, word unexpectedly arrived, ordering them back to Afghanistan to deploy the 4 remaining bombs, the last remaining out of their 16 total Joint Direct Attack Munition stock. Each bomb weighing 2,000 pounds. JDAMs, as they are known, are unguided bombs that have been fitted with GPS guidance system. To return, though, they needed even more fuel. A tanker was dispatched to their bomber named the Spirit of America, only for Neil and Dele to learn that the tanker crew had never refueled a B-2 before. Well, imagine that one. They were forced to wait until a B-2 certified tanker crew nearby could be found and routed their way. By this point in the mission, neither pilot was consuming much food, instead preferring to focus on water intake since they weren't burning many calories. A cooler in the back was packed with snacks, Neil said. Probably beef jerky and grapes, maybe a sandwich. After dropping their final bombs, the pilots turned south to Diego Garcia, home to a small air base in the Indian Ocean. Knowing they'd finished on the island, Neil had packed a piece of gear not commonly seen in a B-2 bomber. He brought his fishing rod. Another crew took over the Spirit of America on Diego Garcia, and Neil and Dele hopped on a military transport aircraft back to Missouri. That was a little bit more comfortable than the way we got there, Dele said. In an email to BI, Air Force Public Affairs official declined to say whether the same Spirit of America aircraft participated in the Iran mission, citing operational security concerns. Looking at the recent B-2 bomber mission into Iran, Dele shared that he was most impressed by the maintenance and management of the fleet. The entire B-2 fleet is less than 24 aircraft, meaning that the Iran mission, including aircraft used as decoys, required much of U.S. fleet to fly for days without any apparent breakdowns. The Air Force put up a third of its bomber fleet in one night to do this mission with precision, Daly said. That's incredible. So there you go. To fly a B-2, this stealth bomber. Pretty cool. Anyway, like I said, I want to share that article. If you didn't want to listen to me read it, look it up, read it. It's interesting. So, I mean, man, could you imagine flying in that thing, though? Come on. That would be cool. This is Wolfgang. I hope everybody has a great Taco Tuesday. Blessed be, stay safe, and I'll bullshit with y'all later. Bye.